Wednesday. So I am so sorry it's taken almost a whole week to read a new chapter, but guess what? I'll read two today. I'll read chapter 11 and chapter 12. Okay, we only have 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 left. We only have 5 chapters left. So my goal is to get them done by Friday. So I'm going to do 2 today, 2 tomorrow, and 1 on Friday, and we should be done with the book. Yay! I haven't decided yet if we're going to read the second book, which was the movie we watched, The Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or if we're going to skip that one and go to The Horse and His Boy, which is, it's a good one too. So is Prince Caspian and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. We should see how many books we can get done. I'll try to map out and see how many of these we can finish by summer, and I might still go through summer. Maybe I'll just read the whole. I'm gonna start reading. We're gonna do that. Chapter 11. Digory and his uncle are both in trouble. That is the title. It's a long title. Also, side note, see my dog right there? That's Sophie. Sophie! Hi, Sophie! She's on my pillow right now. You comfy? Soph, you comfy? Oh. That's right. Just make yourself more comfy on my pillow. That's great. Okay, here we go. You may think that the animals were very... Let's rewind, because we haven't, talked about the last chapter previously. So remember, the lion was still singing. He gave the animals the ability to talk and think. They started chasing after Uncle Andrew because they wanted to see what he was. And then Digory and Polly started going to the lion. Okay, back to this. Chapter 11. Digory and his uncle are both in trouble. You may think that the animals were very stupid not to see at once that Uncle Andrew was the same kind of creature as the other 2 children and the cabbie. But you must remember that the animals knew nothing about clothes. They thought that Polly's frock and Digory's Norfolk suit and Cabbie's bowler hat were much parts of them as their own furs and feathers. They wouldn't have known that they wouldn't have known even that those 3 were all the same kind if they hadn't spoken to them, and if Strawberry hadn't seemed to think so. And Uncle Andrew was a great deal... I can't read today. Uncle Andrew was a great deal taller than the children and a good deal thinner than the cabbie. He was all in black except for his white waistcoat, not very white by now, and the great gray mop of his hair, now very wild indeed, didn't look to them like anything they had seen on the other animals. So it was only natural that they should be puzzled. Worst of all, he didn't seem to be able to talk. He had tried to, but when the bulldog spoke to him, or as he thought first snarled and growled at him, he held out his shaking hand and gasped, "Good doggy," then "Poor old fellow." But the beast could not understand him any more than he could understand them. Remember, the kids could hear the animals talk. Uncle Andrew just heard animal noises. They didn't hear any words, only vague sizzling noises. Perhaps it was just as well they didn't, for no dog that I ever knew, at least of a talking dog in Narnia, likes being called a good doggy, and any more than you would like to be called my little man. Then Uncle Andrew dropped down in a dead faint. "There," said the warthog, "it's only a tree. I always thought so." Remember, they never had seen a faint or a fall. So, here's our picture. Uncle Andrew is on the ground, and now the animals are around him. Going, "What the heck are you doing, bro? You're a tree. You just fell." The bulldog, who had been sniffing Uncle Andrew all over, raised his head and said, "It's an animal. Certainly an animal, and it probably is the same kind as the other ones." "I don't see that," said one of the bears. "An animal wouldn't just roll over like that. We're animals, and we don't roll over. We stand up, like this." And he rose to his hind legs, took a step back, and tripped over a low branch and fell flat on his back. "The third joke! The third joke! The third joke!" said the jackdaw in great excitement. "I still think it's sort of a tree," said the warthog. "If it's a tree," said the other bear, "there might be a bee's nest in it." "I'm sure it's not a tree," said the badger. "I've had a sort of idea, and I was trying to speak it before it toppled over." "That was only the wind in its branches," said the warthog. "You surely don't mean," said the jackdaw to the badger, "that you think it is a talking animal. It didn't say any words." "And yet, you know," said the elephant. The she-elephant, of course. Her husband, as you remember, had been called away by Aslan. "And yet, you know, it might be an animal of some kind. Mightn't the whitest lump at the end of it sort of be a face? And couldn't those holes behind be eyes and a mouth? No nose, of course, but then a hem must be narrow-minded. Very few of us have what we could exactly call a nose, and she squinted down the length of her own trunk with pardonable pride. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. The elephant is right, said the tapir. I tell you what, said the donkey, brightly. Perhaps it's an animal that can't talk but thinks it can. Can it be made to stand up? Said the elephant thoughtfully. She took the limp form of Uncle Andrew gently in her trunk and set him up on end, upside down, unfortunately, so that two half souvenirs. I'm really having a hard time reading today. This is really kind of sad, isn't it? 2 halfpence and 3 half-crowns and a sixpence fell out of his pocket. But it was no use. Uncle Andrew merely collapsed again. There, said several voices. It isn't an animal at all. It's not alive. I tell you it is an animal, said the bulldog. Smell it for yourself. Smelling isn't everything, said the elephant. Why, said the bulldog. If a fellow can't trust his nose, what can he trust? Well, his brains, perhaps, she replied mildly. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. Well, we must do something about it, said the elephant, because it may be the Nevil, and it must be shown to Aslan. What do most of us think? Is it an animal or some kind of tree? Tree! Tree! Said a dozen voices. Very well, said the elephant. Then if it's a tree, it wants to be planted. We must dig a hole. The two moles settled that part of the business pretty quickly. There was some dispute as to which way was up for Uncle Andrew and which ought to be put in the hole, and he had a very narrow escape from being put head first foremost. Several animals said his legs must be the branches, therefore the gray fluffy thing, which they meant his hair, must be his root. But others said that the forked end of him was much muddier and that spread out more, as the roots ought to do. So finally he was planted right way up, which they had patted him down. When they had patted down the earth around him, it came above his knees. It looks dreadfully withered, said the donkey. Of course, it needs some watering, said the elephant. I think I might say, meaning no offense to anyone present, that perhaps for all that sort of work, my kind of nose... I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog, but the elephant walked away quietly to the river, filled her trunk with water, and came back to attend to Uncle Andrew. The sagacious animal went on doing this until gallons of water had been squirted all over him, and water was running out of the shirts and the skirts of his frock, as if he had been in a bath with all of his clothes on. And at the end it revived him. He woke from his faint. What an awakening it was! But we must leave him to think over his wicked deed if he was likely to do anything sensible, and turn to more important things. Strawberry trotted on with Digory on his back till the noise of the other animals died away, and now a little group of Aslan and his chosen counselors was quite close. Digory knew that he couldn't possibly break in on the solemn meeting, but there was no need to. I'm going to pause real quick. Here's another picture. They planted Uncle Andrew, so you can see right there. They planted him, and the elephant's watering him. Back to Digory's meeting. Sorry. At a word from Aslan, the he-elephant and the ravens and all the rest of them drew aside. Digory slipped off the horse and found himself face to face with Aslan. Aslan was bigger and much more beautiful and more brightly golden and more terrible than anything he had thought of. He dared not look directly into his great eyes. Please, Mr. Lion, Aslan, sir, said Digory, please, will you give me some magic fruit of this country to make my mother well? He had been desperately hoping that the lion would say yes. He had been horribly afraid he might say no, but he was taken aback when it did neither. This is a boy, said Aslan, not looking at Digory but at his counselors. This is the boy who did it. Oh dear, thought Digory, what have I done now? Son of Adam, said the lion, there is an evil witch abroad in my new land of Narnia. Tell these good beasts how she came here. A dozen different things that he might say flashed through Digory's mind, but he had the sense to say nothing except the exact truth. I brought her here, Aslan, he answered in a low voice. For what purpose? I wanted to get her out of my own world and back into her own. I thought I was taking her back to her own place. How came she to be in your world, son of Adam? By magic. The lion said nothing. and Digory knew that he had not told enough. "It was my uncle, Aslan," he said. "He sent us out of our own world by magic rings, or at least I had to go because he sent Polly first, and then we met the witch in a place called Charn, and she just held on to us when we—" "You met the witch?" said Aslan in a low voice, which had a threat and a growl to it. "She woke up," said Digory wretchedly, and then turning very white, I woke her up because I wanted to know what would happen if I struck the bell. Polly didn't want to do it. It was her fault. I fought her. I know I shouldn't have. I think it was a bit enchanted by the writing under the bell." "Do you?" asked Aslan, speaking in a very low, deep voice. "No," said Digory. "I see now I wasn't. I was only pretending." There was a long pause, and Digory was thinking all the time, "I've spoiled everything. There's no chance of getting anything from Mother." When the lion spoke again, it was not to Digory. "You see, friends," he said, "that before the new clean world I gave you is 7 hours old, a force of evil has already entered it, waked and brought hither by the son of Adam. The beasts, even Strawberry, all turned their eyes on Digory till he felt that he wished the ground would swallow him up. But do not be cast down," said Aslan, still speaking to the beast. "Evil will come of that evil, but it is still a long way off, and I will see to it that the worst falls upon myself. In the meantime, let us take such an order for many 100 years, yet there shall be a merry land and a merry world. And an Adam's race has done the harm, Adam's race shall help to heal it. Draw near, you other two." The last words were spoken to Polly and the cabby who would now have arrived. Polly, all eyes and mouth, were staring at Aslan and holding the cabby's right hand rather tightly. The cabby gave one glance at the lion and took off his bowler hat. No one had yet seen him without it. When it was off, he looked younger and nicer and more like a countryman and less like a London cabman. "Son," said the Aslan to the cabby, "I have known you long. Do you know me?" "Well, no, sir," said the cabby. "Leastways, not in an ordinary manner of speaking. Yet I feel somehow, if I may be so free, as we've met before." "It is well," said the lion. "You know better than you think you know, and you shall live to know me better. How does this land please you?" "It's a fair treat, sir," said the cabby. "Would you like to live here always?" "Well, you see, sir, I'm a married man," said the cabby. "If my wife was here, then neither of us would ever want to go back to London, I reckon. We're both country folk, really." Aslan threw up his shaggy head, opened his mouth, and uttered a long, single note, not very loud, but full of power. Polly's heart jumped in her body when she heard it. She felt for sure that it was a call, and that anyone who heard that call would want to obey it, and what's more, would be able to obey it, however many worlds and ages lie between. And so, though she was filled with wonder, she was not really astonished or shocked when all of a sudden a young woman with a kind, honest face stepped out of nowhere and stood beside her. Polly knew at once that this was the cabby's wife, fetched out of our world not by any tiresome magic rings, but quickly, simply, and sweetly as a bird flies to its nest. The young woman had apparently been in the middle of a washing day, for she wore an apron, her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows, and there were soap suds on her hands. If she had time to put on her good clothes, her best hat and imitation cherries on it, it would have looked dreadful, and as it was, she looked rather nice. Of course, she thought she was dreaming, and that was the only reason she didn't rush across to her husband and ask him what on earth was happened to them both. But when she looked at the lion, she didn't feel quite so sure it was a dream, yet for some reason she did not appear frightened. Then she dropped a little half curtsy, as some country girls still know how to do in those days. After that, she went and put her hand in the cabby's and stood there, looking around a little shyly. "My children," said Aslan, fixing his eyes on both of them, "you will be the first king and queen of Narnia." Here's your picture. So you have both the cabby and his wife. "You'll be the first king and queen of Narnia." The cabby opened his mouth in astonishment, and his wife turned very red. "You shall rule and name all these creatures and do justice among them, and protect them from their enemies when enemies arise. And enemies will arise, for there is an evil witch in our world." The cabby swallowed hard 2 or 3 times and cleared his throat. "Begging your pardon, sir," he said, "and thanking you very much, I'm sure, which my missus does the same, but I ain't no sort of chap for that kind of job. Never had much education, you see." "Well," said Aslan, "you can use a spade and a plow and raise food out of the earth?" Yes, sir, I could do that, a bit of sort of work. I was brought up like that. Can you rule these creatures kindly and fairly, remembering they are not slaves like the dumb beasts of your world, but talking beasts and free subjects? I see that, sir, said the cabby. I try to do the square thing by 'em all. And would you bring up your children and grandchildren to do the same? It'd be up to me to try, sir. I'll do my best, won't we, Nellie? And you wouldn't have favorites among your own children and among the other creatures, let any hold under it or use it hardly? I never could abide by such things going on, sir. That's the truth. I'd give 'em what they, I'd give them what for it I got 'em. Man, he speaks so weird, said the cabby, although this conversation in his voice was growing slower and richer, more like the country voice he must have had when he was like a boy, less sharp and quick, and less of a voice of Cockney, which is a type of British accent. And if enemies came against the land, for enemies will arise, and if there was war, would you be the first to charge and the last to retreat? Well, sir, said the cabby very slowly, a chap don't exactly know till he's tried. I dare say I might turn out ever such a soft un, but did never know fightin' except with my fists. I try. That's what I'd hope. I'd try to do my bit. Then, said Aslan, you have done all that a king should do. Your coronation will be held presently, and you and your children and grandchildren shall be blessed, and some of the kings of Narnia, and others will be kings of the Archen land, which lies yonder over the southern mountains. And you, little daughter, he turned to Polly, are welcome. Have you forgiven the boy for the violence he did to you in the Hall of Images, in the desolate place, in the accursed charn? Yes, Aslan, we've made it up, said Polly. That is well, said Aslan. And now for the boy himself. And that's chapter 11. Sorry, guys, that's where it ends. Chapter 12 is called Strawberry's Adventure. So I'll be reading that one in a little bit. So hopefully enjoy our next couple chapters. Love and support you.